All right, so maybe you're like me, and you've been thinking a lot about climate change, right? And all those potential solutions out there. Well, today we're going deep on this blog post called Glacier. It's by an engineer named Larry Dean.
Oh, yeah, I know Dean. He's got that blog, the Engineers line, right?
That's the one. And what's interesting is Dean's not so much about the politics of it all. He's really asking, can we fix climate change with like practical engineering solutions?
I like that approach. Get stuff done.
Mm.
So what's he suggesting?
Well, he starts off with this fact that just kind of hits you. He says that the amount of carbon dioxide, CO2 in the atmosphere has almost doubled
Right.
since the 1800s.
Yeah, I read that. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is when you think about it.
Huge implications.
Definitely. But, there's always that debate,
Oh,
right?
yeah, for sure.
Natural climate cycle versus us humans causing the problem.
Exactly. So where does Dean land on that?
Well, he sort of leans towards human impact, but
Yeah.
what's cool is he's like, you know what? It doesn't even really matter for his purposes. Like, let's just find solutions,
I love that.
yeah, that work.
Practical. Regardless.
So he's not getting bogged down.
No, not at all. In fact, he starts by picking apart some of those solutions we hear about all the time.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Wind and solar power,
Okay.
nuclear, even biofuels.
He's got issues with those.
He brings up some really good points, actually, about their limitations.
Like what kinds of limitations?
Well, he argues that compared to what we already have, for fossil fuels,
Oh,
they're just not as efficient or cost effective a lot of times. And he talks about reliability and safety too.
that's interesting because those are usually the ones everyone's like, this is it. This is clean and sustainable.
Right. But he's got another idea.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
Geothermal.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Geothermal energy.
Yeah. He thinks it could be a real game changer, especially if we use what we already know from the oil industry.
Wait, so instead of pulling out oil, we'd be tapping into the Earth's heat. Exactly. We've got the expertise, we've got the infrastructure for deep drilling.
Oh, right, like fracking and all that.
Yeah, all those techniques.
Wow.
They could be used to get to that heat instead.
So we're not starting from scratch, we're repurposing.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. How
Yeah.
much power are we talking about here?
Oh, it's huge. The International Energy Agency, the IEA, they estimate there's enough geothermal energy down there to power both India and the U.S.
No way.
combined.
That's insane. But isn't geothermal kind of risky? I mean, all that fracking causing earthquakes and stuff?
Yeah, that's a fair point. Dean addresses that, though. He's careful to say, hold on, we got to separate fracking itself from injecting the waste fluids.
So it's not the fracking, it's what they do with the stuff afterwards
Right.
that causes the quakes.
And with geothermal, he says, there's barely any waste fluid
Oh, okay.
because they use way fewer chemicals, and it's a closed-loop system.
Interesting.
That risk is much lower.
Okay. So we're using tech we already have in a cleaner way to tap into this massive energy source.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's the gist.
I like it. So big picture, what's Dean really trying to say here?
I think he's saying, let's move past the political arguments, right?
Yeah.
Focus on what works.
Solutions?
Yeah, practical solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Use our expertise, adapt to the challenges, and just build on what we know, whatever happens with climate change.
So he's not saying, like, ignore it. He's saying, regardless, we can do this.
Exactly. We can do this.
All right, I am on board with that. So where do we go from here? How do we actually make geothermal energy a thing, not just an idea?
It's funny, actually, how Dean ties geothermal to the very industry that often gets blamed for climate change,
The oil and gas companies?
Yeah, exactly. Like you say, hey, instead of just pointing fingers,
Mhm.
let's see if it can be part of the solution.
Right, use what they know.
Exactly. He's like, look, they've spent decades, right,
Yeah.
figuring out how to drill deep, mastering techniques like fracking.
And that's what we need for geothermal, too.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like a perfect fit,
Right,
almost.
it's like a natural evolution.
Totally. Adapt the infrastructure, the expertise to a new, cleaner source.
I'm with you, but I'm guessing it's not just a snap your fingers kind of thing, right?
No, definitely not. There are definitely some hurdles.
Like, what are we up against here?
Well, cost is a big one. Deep drilling, fracking, all that, it's expensive. So the initial
And so
investment,
get the geothermal infrastructure in place.
yeah, that's going to be significant.
That's true for any big energy project, though, right? Like even building wind farms or solar arrays, it all costs a ton upfront.
You're absolutely right. But it's definitely a factor. And then there's location.
Oh, right.
Geothermal resources aren't everywhere, obviously.
Just in some places are just better suited than others.
Exactly. Like areas with a lot of volcanic activity, those are going to be prime spots.
Okay, makes sense. Now, what about like the environmental side of things? Anytime you're drilling deep into the earth, you got to wonder what the impacts are going to be.
For sure, for sure. Dean actually talks about that. He emphasizes the closed-loop system they use.
Remind me what that means again?
Sure. So unlike traditional fracking, where they often pump those waste fluids back into the ground,
Which can cause all sorts of problems.
right? With geothermal, they recycle the water and steam. It's a much more contained process.
So less chance of contaminating groundwater or triggering earthquakes?
Yeah, exactly. But even with a closed loop, there's still going to be some disruption to the environment when they're first drilling and building everything.
Right, so it's not completely impact-free.
No. It's like anything else, there are trade-offs.
Yeah.
But Dean's point is, let's be smart about it.
Mm.
Focus on what's feasible and responsible.
And think long-term, right? The benefits of a clean, sustainable energy source that could power whole countries, that's got to be worth something.
Absolutely. But it does raise some other questions too. Like, what if we really did shift to mostly geothermal power? What would that mean for everything else?
Like all our existing infrastructure.
Exactly. Think about our power grids, how we distribute energy.
Yeah, would we have to like completely revamp everything?
It's possible. Geothermal plants are going to be in different places than our current power plants, so yeah, some big changes might be needed.
And what about the economic side? Switching to geothermal, that would create new industries and jobs, but it would also disrupt existing ones, right? Like what happens to all the people working in fossil fuels?
100%. It's a transition that would have to be managed really carefully. And then there's the question of access, too, and affordability. Would geothermal be available to everyone, or would it create a whole new kind of energy inequality?
So many things to think about. It's not just a tech shift, it's a societal shift.
Exactly. It's about rethinking energy, infrastructure, economic models, even our relationship with the Earth itself.
It's daunting, but kind of exciting too, right? To think we could harness the Earth's own heat to power everything and do it without relying on fossil fuels.
It's a vision worth exploring, for sure.
Yeah.
But let's be realistic, too. What are the downsides? Are there unintended consequences we haven't even thought of yet?
Because every solution, no matter how good it sounds, is going to come with its own set of
Oh,
challenges.
excellent.
And if we want to make smart choices about the future, we got to understand what those challenges are.
Dean's blog post is a good reminder that we can't just, wish climate change away or rely on quick fixes. We got to be honest about how big the problem is and how much work it's going to take to address it.
He's challenging us to think like engineers, innovate, adapt, be ready for whatever comes next.
And even though he's laying out this massive challenge, he's also, optimistic, he believes we can do it.
So where do we go from here? How do we take this idea of geothermal and make it happen?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Mm.
It's not something any one person can answer. It's going to take scientists, engineers, policymakers, businesses, everyday people all working together.
All hands on deck.
Exactly. Open dialogue, research, policies that encourage this shift to cleaner energy.
And a willingness to like shake things up a bit, right?
Ah,
Question the old ways of doing things.
Dean's post is like a spark, He gets you thinking about a different kind of future.
And it's up to us to turn that spark into a flame.
Build on his ideas, push the boundaries, make clean energy accessible for everybody. Now, before we move on, I do want to bring up one more point that Dean makes. He talks about using food crops for biofuels.
Oh, right. That was one of the limitations he mentioned. What about it?
He says it's just an ethical problem,
Wow.
using food for fuel when there are people going hungry.
Yeah, that makes sense. Seems like we could avoid that competition for resources, especially if we have other options like geothermal.
Right. And he also points out that using food for fuel can actually drive up food prices, which hurts low-income communities the most.
So it's a social justice issue, too.
It is a complex issue, for sure. But it shows how important it is to think about the ethical side of our energy choices.
Okay, good point. So we've talked about the benefits of geothermal, the challenges, and the bigger picture. What else should we be considering as we dig deeper into this?
Okay, so we've kind of laid it out, right? Geothermal's got this huge potential, but it's not a slam dunk.
It's a puzzle.
Exactly, a puzzle with some big pieces missing.
Mm-hmm. So where do we start? Like, how do we actually make this happen?
Well, Dean doesn't give us like a step-by-step plan,
Yeah.
but he keeps coming back to that idea of using what we already know,
Right.
especially from the oil and gas industry.
Right. Instead of seeing them as the problem.
They could actually be part of the solution.
Totally. I mean, think about it. They're the ones who know how to do deep drilling, fracking, all those really complex projects.
Right.
That's the expertise we need to get geothermal going.
So it sounds like collaboration is going to be huge here. We need engineers, geologists, environmental scientists,
Policymakers,
the oil and gas folks themselves.
everyone's got to be at the table.
It's like a massive team effort.
It would be, but can you imagine if we actually pulled it off? A world powered by clean, renewable energy coming right from the earth.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And not just cleaner, but think about it, way more reliable too. We're not talking about wind or solar here. That depends on the weather.
That's a huge point. Rain or shine, day or night, that heat from the earth is always there.
It's consistent.
Yeah.
Base load power. We could stabilize our grids, get off those fluctuating fossil fuels.
Okay, so we've got clean energy, we've got reliability, but what about those challenges? They don't just magically go away, right?
Of course not.
Yeah.
Like you said, the cost is going to be a big hurdle.
Those upfront costs for geothermal projects.
Yeah, and remember, those resources aren't just everywhere.
Right, we can't just drill anywhere. And even if we find the right spot, we got to make sure we're not messing up the environment.
Yeah, minimizing the impact on those ecosystems, doing everything sustainably, that's got to be a top priority.
It seems like we could learn a lot from, the mistakes of the past with environmental stuff and even just how we work with communities.
Definitely. Yeah. Transparency, collaboration with the locals, that's huge. We can't just force these projects on people. They need to be involved from day one.
It's funny, Dean's post is really focused on the engineering.
Yeah.
We keep coming back to these other things.
The social stuff, economic, political.
Right, like it's all connected.
It is. He gives us the engineering foundation. But you're right. Those other aspects are just as important. It's not just about drilling. It's about building a future that works for everybody.
And that means changing how we think about energy, right? Moving past those old ways.
Exactly. We need efficiency, conservation, renewables. And we got to be willing to challenge the status quo, try new things.
Dean's post, it's like a call to action, a way to imagine what could be.
And then it's on us, right? To take that vision and make it real.
Build on those ideas, push the boundaries, make clean energy available to everyone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, how are you feeling about all this?
I'm excited, definitely, but also kind of, I don't know, like a little bit anxious. We've got this incredible opportunity with geothermal, but there's a lot of work to do.
I get it. Excitement for what's possible and urgency, because we know we got to act now.
The longer we wait, the harder it gets.
Ian's saying we have the knowledge, the tech, the smarts to solve this. It's time to do it.
Harness our potential and create a future where we're living in harmony with the planet.
Powered by the Earth itself.
That's a powerful image. And for everyone listening out there, I hope this leaves you with some things to think about. What's your role in all of this? What can you do to be a part of this?
Because the future isn't just something that happens. We build it together.
And with geothermal energy, maybe, just maybe, that future can be cleaner, brighter, and powered by the very heart of our planet.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Well,
See you next time.
see you then.